Greetings everyone. Today I'll be talking about the service development needs for incarcerated adults with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, based on a study by Newman et al. In 2018. We'll explore what ASD is, how it presents in prison populations, the challenges in detecting and diagnosing ASD, and the barriers to effective support. I'll also share recommendations from the research, including an innovative embedded system developed in the UK, plus some broader evidence-based approaches and cultural considerations that are vital in this setting. The focus here is on practical, easy to understand information so we can see not only the problems but also the potential solutions that can make a real difference. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental condition, meaning it's something that people are born with. It shapes how they experience the world. While no two people with autism are exactly the same, there are common features. First, there are social communication challenges. This might mean difficulty with back and forth conversations, understanding sarcasm, or interpreting facial expressions and tone of voice. In prison, for example, not greeting someone in the expected way could be seen as disrespect, even though it's not intentional. Second, we often see restricted or repetitive behaviours. This could be repeating certain movement or phrases, following strict routines, or having a very deep interest in a particular topic. In a prison environment where flexibility is often required, these behaviours can be misinterpreted as being uncooperative. Third, there are sensory sensitivities. Some individuals may find fluorescent lighting overwhelming, certain clothing materials uncomfortable, or loud noises distressing. Imagine trying to cope in a prison wing where the noise and crowding are constant. This can be a daily struggle for someone with ASD. Importantly, these differences usually appear in early life, but they can be overlooked or misunderstood, especially if this person has developed effective coping strategies or if their challenges are masked by other behaviours. The key point is that these traits impact everyday life and are not better explained by another condition like intellectual disability alone. While ASD affects roughly 0.5 to 2.25% of people in the general population, research suggests that the rates in prisons can be significantly higher, of between 1.5 to 8%. This is several times more common in some prison settings. Why might that be? Some people with ASD may struggle in school or social settings, leading to exclusion, unemployment, and vulnerability to exploitation. These difficulties can increase the risk of coming into contact with the justice system, not because ASD causes criminal behaviour, but because of the social and systematic challenges surrounding it. In prison, individuals with ASD face heightened vulnerability. They are more likely to experience bullying or victimisation because their behaviours may make them stand out. They may also be socially isolated, either by choice to avoid their overwhelming environments, or because others don't understand their differences. Inappropriate or inadequate care is also a major issue. Without tailored support, they may be placed in segregation to manage their behaviour, which can worsen anxiety, depression, and sensory distress. Understanding these risks is crucial if we want prisons to be safer and more rehabilitative environments. The Newman et al. Study aimed to identify what services are needed to better support adults with ASD in New South Wales prisons. This is particularly relevant to our setting as it's within the Australian prison system. The researchers consulted with 5 key stakeholders, 4 from the Justice, Health and Forensic Mental Health Network and 1 from the Correction Services New South Wales. These met 5 times over 2 months, totalling about 4.5 hours of interviews, plus email discussions as well. The data was analysed qualitatively, which means they were looking for themes and patterns in the participants' feedback. One of the biggest challenges is that there's no standardized screening process for autism spectrum disorder at prison entry. This means there's no consistent way to spot people who may have autism. Instead, staff often rely on self-report, but many people in prison have never been diagnosed. They don't know they're autistic, or they may choose not to disclose it for fear of being prejudiced against. There are also staff knowledge gaps. Prison reception staff have limited time and often have not had in-depth training in autism awareness. The intake process is focused on immediate safety risks, so neurodevelopmental needs can be overlooked. Without screening, identification often happens late, usually only after repeated behavioural issues. At that point, the individual may already have faced disciplinary action instead of support. There are screening tools that could be adapted for prisons, such as the Autism Spectrum Quotient, or the AQ, or the RAADS-R, which is another screening tool. If these tools are showing that autism is a possibility within the prison population or within that particular prisoner, they can do a formal assessment using the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule 2, or the ADOS-2. But these, however, are limited in custodial settings, as they can be time-consuming, rely on literacy, and may not account for cultural or language differences. There is also the fact that these sort of tests require significant training by mental health care staff to be able to administer them in a way that allows diagnosis of autism within the prisoner. This sort of training is not currently available within these prison settings. But ultimately, detection is that first step that is needed. If you don't know someone has ASD, you can't adapt the environment or communication to meet their needs. Even when someone is suspected of having autism spectrum disorder, there are major barriers in confirming a diagnosis. Firstly, as mentioned earlier, there's a shortage of psychologists in the prison system who are trained and authorised to conduct ASD assessments for adults, especially those psychologists that are used or are working within a forensic setting. Secondly, a proper diagnosis requires a developmental history, such as the information about a person's childhood, education, and early behaviour. This can be hard to get if family members are involved or those records are missing. Thirdly, comorbid conditions can make diagnosis much more complex. For example, ASD can be comorbid with things like anxiety, ADHD, or depression, and these can overshadow the autism traits or be misinterpreted as the primary issue that the particular prisoner with ASD is experiencing. The result is that many people with ASD in prisons remain undiagnosed. A 2017 survey in New South Wales prisons found that only 1.3% of prisoners have a recorded ASD diagnosis, far below the expected rate. That suggests many are missing out on the adjustments and support that can help them cope and rehabilitate. As of 2018, when this study was released, there were no dedicated ASD-specific support services in New South Wales prisons. Instead, some behaviours associated with autism, like avoiding eye contact, becoming distressed by noise, or insisting on certain routines, are often managing by placing that person or prisoner in isolation or seclusion. While this might reduce immediate conflict, it can actually worsen the sensory distress that is experienced by the prisoner, as well as their anxiety and depression levels. Mental health services are generally designed to treat conditions like depression or substance use disorders. While those are important, they don't address the core issues that are related to autism and the needs such as structured routine, sensory adjustment, or adapted communication strategies. Without targeted services, many people with ASD simply don't get the kind of support that will help them navigate prison life more safely and productively and assist with their rehabilitation, which should be what the goal of prison is. The lack of integrated autism-informed approach means that those opportunities for those rehabilitations that were just spoken about can be missed, leaving both staff and prisoners struggling with the avoidable challenges that can come about through effective communication and adaptations to serve the ASD prisoners. Newman et al. Recommended several key changes to improve the outcomes for prisoners with ASD. Firstly, introduce a structure, computer-based screening at the intake. A powerful example comes from Kirby and Sanders' work at the HMP and Waiau Park in Wales, where they developed an embedded whole prison model to identify and support individuals with learning difficulties and disabilities, including autism spectrum disorder. The centerpiece of this model is the Do-It Profiler, a modular, accessible computer system completed within the first 48 hours of arrival. All questions are voiced, text can be enlarged, and colored overlays can be used. Trained peer mentors, as in other prisoners, guide new arrivals through the process, helping to reduce anxiety and improve engagement. The profiler gathers information across key areas such as attention, literacy, numeracy, organisation, social communication, and motor skills, as well as developmental, medical, housing, and mental health history. This can allow anyone who has been diagnosed with ASD to be able to report this, as there seems to be a breakdown between what previous clients have been or prisoners have been diagnosed with and their records within the prison system. What this actually outputs from that system are actually twofold: a personalised prisoner report with strategies for success, simple, practical advice like breaking down instructions, using visual prompts, or adjusting routines, and a staff guidance report that fits into the 5-minute intervention model, enabling models to turn everyday interactions into supportive, rehabilitative conversations. When high needs are flagged, a multidisciplinary case conference is held, involving the custodial staff, the prison officers, health teams, and the prisoner, leading to a supported living plan. The system doesn't just screen, it drives immediate, targeted action. It also generates real-time prison-wide data to track patterns, measure intervention impacts, and identify training needs within the staff. At Park, this approach has been linked to a reduction in violence, segregation, and self-harm, alongside better staff understanding of behaviour. Introducing such an embedded system in the New South Wales prisons could transform ASD detection and support, ensuring help starts from day one rather than months or years into the sentence. Effective support for prisoners with autism spectrum disorder requires input from multiple disciplines. These include psychologists, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, mental health care nurses, as well as the correctional officers that they see on a daily basis. Cultural sensitivity is crucial. For instance, Indigenous and culturally and linguistically diverse prisoners may experience additional barriers within their mental health disorders due to language differences or cultural stigma around the disability. Gender also matters, as women with autism are more likely to be undiagnosed, and their presentations can be different from men, sometimes not including some of the more known parts of ASD that people look for. Ethical considerations include ensuring informed consent for assessment and protecting confidentiality is key as when the prisoners are in the close quarters of prison life, information can get out and known very quickly. To summarise, this was a qualitative consultation study with 5 stakeholders in New South Wales prisons. The main themes identified were detection gaps and inadequate service provisions for prisoners with ASD. The strengths of the study include it being the first of its kind in Australia and highlighting the perspectives of both health and correction staff. Limitations include that it's a small sample size and the fact that it was only focused on the service providers, not on the lived experience of prisoners themselves. Future studies should incorporate how those who are suffering or living the process of having ASD within the prison system are finding the services provided and the level of care provided by those health and correctional services staff. The key message from this research is that without identification, resources cannot be targeted. Screening, staff training, individualised plans, and multidisciplinary collaboration are all essential in improving the outcomes for prisoners with ASD. These changes just don't benefit the individual and the prisoner. They also support prison safety, reducing behaviour incidences, and ultimately improving rehabilitation prospects. They also decrease the likelihood that a person who is suffering from ASD will be isolated, will be attacked within the prison yard due to abnormal behaviour that other inmates perceive as being threatening or different in some way. The main references used are the study by Newman et al. From 2018 and also the Kirby and Sanders study that was referenced within the Newman et al. Study. Thank you for your attention and please put any questions you have in the comments.